Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about this idea of open borders and how the white West, so the white countries, the rich white countries, are morally obliged to have open borders, but no other country is. It's a bit like racism can only be done by white people, but no one else. So the absurdity is apparent from the outset. If open borders are open borders, then everyone can just go everywhere. Well, okay, that's one thing, but the open borders should only apply to the rich white Western countries. No other country needs to have or should have. They're under no moral obligation to have open borders. So I just want to, in this essay, I just want to talk about that as an issue and have a look at some of the strands that go back and forth on that. Now, I was in a taxi a while ago talking to, I think the guy was Chinese, and he was saying that the West, or Australia in this case, but the West generally should have open borders. It should be okay for anyone in the world that wants to come to the West or come to Australia in this case should be allowed to without any restriction. So, why, asks me, why would that be the case? Would you accept that everyone can come to your country, to China? Our country, you cannot come to ours. All right then. Well, where is the moral story in that? Something is just so one way, and he was adamant that no, should be able to, and then went on a little bit about the only reason the West is rich because they stole it from everyone else. Therefore, people from poor parts of the world are only coming to the white West to take back what was stolen from them in the first place, and that's very much a line they get fed from. The nationalists in places like China and India sort of push that one, but it's also a line that's pushed very much by even the communists in the 1960s in their agitation and undermining of Western countries back then. But even today, all through the NGOs that are United Nations activists, they're all pushing this line. So it's very much a talking point from them. But just on the issue of open borders, I had to listen to a lot of, well, quite a few, at least online. There's various think tanks and open border advocacy groups, things like that. And with rare, in fact, I can't think of any exception, they're nearly always headed by Jewish activists. And there's a story in that which I'll come back to, but that would seem to be odd, given that what Jews represent, 2 or 3% of the world of the United States population, and a minuscule proportion of the world population, and yet they seem to be at the apex of all these open border advocacy groups. So I was listening to one, clearly an articulate guy. I mean, the guy's and he's being interviewed, and the interview is fairly soft. I would have gone in harder on this if I'd been interviewing, and not so much harder, but we've just asked questions to get the guy to justify his position and explain it and put the reasons on the table as to why it must be so. But he was saying that open borders in the United States, in this case, should, and all across the Western world, but particularly the United States, should and must be open to anybody who wants to come. And he just said anybody who wants to come here to the US should be able to come whenever they want. Should they be screened for like skills and capability, language capability, education? No, anybody, anytime, for any reason, should be able to come to the United States. All right, then, well, that would mean billions of people would come. I mean, could the United States handle a population of 3 or 4 billion people? Shoulder shrug. I don't know, maybe. Now, there's this articulate guy. Clearly, he just didn't want to deal with that question. And when you consider that really 4 billion of the world's population are living in approximate poverty. There's a billion of people living in poverty in just the or 1.5 billion people living in abject poverty in the Indian subcontinent alone. And there'd be many who are struggling who would find life much easier in the West. So you could probably go to you probably go to 1.7, 1.8 billion without any trouble at all, just from the Indian subcontinent, of people who would happily move tomorrow to the United States if they could get there. And clearly that would turn the United States into a shithole. So there's not much thought being put into this. So this Jewish academic in this think tank, activist think tank, saying that, okay, anybody who wants to come for any reason, regardless of the quality of that person, doesn't matter whether they're physically or mentally handicapped, whether they're educated or whether they get, their skills are needed or they have any skills, whether they're illiterate, or it doesn't matter. They should be able to come whenever they want. So why? Now the response here is just goes to show you how hollow this argument is. That this guy just shrugs and says, "Oh, we're morally obliged to." And then the interviewer moved on to another question. I'd have gone chasing after that. Where does this moral obligation? How is the West morally obliged? Why aren't the black African countries morally obliged to do better for their citizens? Why aren't the people in the subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent, why aren't they morally obliged to work harder and improve the lives of their citizens? Why is it a moral obligation only of white countries to take in billions of folks that want to move there? Why aren't we going to do it the other way? Why aren't a billion black people sent to China, for example, and so on? So it's none of those sort of questions. So the guy just shrugs and said, "Would you have the whole world?" And this is would you have the whole world move to America? Another shoulder shrug. Why not? And again, he couldn't get out beyond this moral obligation thing. Nothing was explained, no reasoning about why it was beneficial, why it was good. There was some mumblings from him about it's a human right to move to wherever you want to go in the world. Is it? Which human right's this? I'm not aware of any human right. But again, the interviewer didn't follow that up. The interviewer should have said, "Well, which human right are you referring to? Is it codified somewhere?" Was that? But that didn't get to just another. And so pretty much every question, and soft as they were, and not followed up as they should have been, was just a shoulder shrug. It's a moral right. It's a moral obligation. It's a human right. So no explanation at all, and no reasoning. So you'd be none the wiser as to why these things have to be done. Why there has to be this mass movement of people. So the idea of shutting down borders or stopping borders or having immigration policy of any sort is considered an infringement upon and an unacceptable infringement upon the human rights of the most illiterate, rural, third world, subsistence, agricultural peasants. They have human rights exactly equal to anybody in a first world country. Now, I do accept, by the way, everyone should be equal under the law, but let's make sure that Western laws that apparently are so attractive to people to want to come move here, why don't we make sure they apply in the black countries or in the subcontinent or Pakistan or anywhere? Why don't we do that? Isn't that a human right that those people should be subject to the same laws and standards? Why aren't we concerned about human rights there? I don't know. Shoulder shrug. And there was, and I've looked at a number of these interviews that have been given, and various written pronouncements and so on, and none of them can explain it. There's always vague references, or there's a United Nations Human Rights Charter or something, but then you go to that, and the wording again is vague and it's fluffy and it's all, but it only seems to be applied. The interpretation is only ever one way. It's not universally applied. So what's an outrageous infringement upon a human right in a white country is, who cares if it happens in a third world country? So why isn't it equally outrageous wherever it happens in the world? If it is a universal human right, then any infringement upon that anywhere in the world would be a situation of outrage, but it's not. It's only an outrage. Human rights outrage if it happens in a white Western country. Anywhere else, it's who cares? can't be bothered, don't know, too difficult, and so on. So clearly, it's not a moral issue or any human right or legal right or anything of that sort that's universally applied. And given it's so selectively applied, then it's not worth a piece of shit. These people are just clearly political activists who are pursuing a certain agenda, and that's it. So let's come back now to why there are so many Jews at the apex of these open borders thing. I almost know as soon as there's an interview or an advocate for open borders and complaining about it, I know. Before they even get to the interview, it's announced that we're going to interview so and so, the chair, the CEO of this human right. I know it's going to be a Jewish person. You almost don't have to guess. So sometimes I'm wrong, but very rarely. So now let's go back into the sort of the Jewish ideology of their existence, of the Jewish diaspora, the existence of the Jewish diaspora going back centuries, by the way. But there's a lot of very unpleasant recent history there. In the 20th century. So what the Jewish article of faith is that the reason Jews have been persecuted in different countries and places, as bad as that is for them, their argument is that often it's involved, pogroms and mass killings, whether it be in Russia and Nazi Germany we know about, and Spain, the Inquisition times, and various other times. This idea of, and we can see what we would today view as anti-Semitism in, say, Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice and that sort of stuff. Shylock the moneylender. Now, what the view is by the Jewish diaspora and their article, sort of mythical articles of faith, is that if Jews were allowed to move anywhere they wanted at any time, for any reason, no reason at all, as long as they have that immediate freedom of movement, because so many of them have skills in their hands, like doctors, dentists, or whatever. They've got the skills. Or many do, not all, but the skills to move around. I'll come back to a story as a kid that I came across on that, actually. But if the Jews could go anywhere they want at any time, to any country, any place, preferably the rich countries, obviously, but as long as they can move around, then they're safe. It's only when a government, whatever government, whether it be the times during the Tsarist Russia and those sort of things, that at any time a government's out to get them, or in some way attack them, imprison them, murder them, whatever it is, as long as they've got that capacity to move anywhere at any time, then they're never really going to be threatened that much. But it's very important they have that capacity, because what happens is when some government comes to get them and they want to move to another country, they can't, because nobody wants very few countries want to take in the Jewish people who would be refugees or immigrants or whatever you want to call them. Now this is a recent one, because when the Nazis were trying to expel the Jews from Germany, it's about 400,000 in total. 200,000 or so were able to get visas to go to other countries. This is during the Depression with very high unemployment, so immigration was very difficult at that time. The most skilled ones got the ability to travel to other countries, but 200,000 or so couldn't. The aim is the reason that the Jews, which I don't accept, it's one of those iconic mythical things. But the thing is, if the view was, if the Jews could have moved from Germany or Europe generally and all gone to America or wherever, Britain and so on, that the Holocaust would never have occurred. And so the pogroms, the Holocaust, and all throughout history, the expulsion of Jews from various regions and countries and provinces, they've had a much harder time, and this is true, by the way, they've had a much harder time because they weren't able to move immediately to just another place of their choosing. They could have gone to other places, But who wants to go to some dirt poor shithole? The Jews want to move to a nice rich country. So that's their thing now. Amidst the human rights argument of well, the black peasant from Africa should be to go anywhere they want to go at any time, then that group of black peasants has within it the Jews that also want to move. So rather than say Jewish people should be uniquely allowed to move to any country they want at any time for any reason, what we're going to say is that it's a human right for everybody, and then we fit into that group, that universal group that can go anywhere at any time. Any idea of borders and immigration policy, qualifications, anything like that, to the Jews immediately means Holocaust, pogrom. It's just to reflect that that's what it means, and so that's just unacceptable to the Jewish diaspora, which is why so many Jewish people are at the apex of this open borders. But I haven't found anyone. Maybe someone exists, maybe a group exists that can explain why open borders, only one way to the rich white country, why open borders are a good idea or helpful or useful or beneficial, or it's beneficial to the penniless illiterate peasant from out in the wilds of Africa. I'm sure that they think, wow, I never knew it could be this good. I mean, that I understand, but why aren't we putting an equal amount of time and energy into helping those African countries become more prosperous? I mean, some of them are quite rich in natural resources and prime farming land and that sort of stuff. So it should be a priority to help them, surely, rather than just say, "Hey, illiterate peasant, you come to the White West and we'll put you on welfare." Say, what the fuck use is that? So no one's been able to explain it to me. Now, if somebody can in the comments, or they know someone that can explain it, and put forward a cogent argument, not moral posturing and anyone disagrees as a Nazi and none of that, but actually real reasons. Now, I'm actually, just to sort of declare my position, I'm someone who thinks skilled immigration is fine. What's wrong with that? If someone has genuine skills and they can speak the language and of the country they're going to, and they've been brought up in cities, they're not rural peasants or something. And they've got a real job to come to, or there's a real demand for the skills. I've got no problem with that. But we need to understand that once you move to actual, real skilled migration, that out of every 100 people that come to the US or Australia or anywhere, Britain, every 100 people, you'll be lucky if even 5% of them have any usable skills or abilities, or speak the language well enough, or have any intention of assimilating and becoming citizens of the country that they've arrived in. At best, 5%, and I don't think that would change. I think if you had a real skilled immigration, I mean a real one, not the sham bullshit ones that the Western governments put up, like Australia ostensibly has a skilled immigration program. That's bullshit. So skilled, unskilled people by the fuckload come here, and then you've got all the family reunion and chain migration things, and so more than half the people who arrive here come through chain migration. So, and they're illiterate and unqualified and so on. But so 5%. So I think if Australia had a skilled migration program, you'd be very lucky if even 25,000 people a year, 30,000 would make it here, and they would be the cream of the third world countries they were coming from. But they're desperately needed in their own countries if those countries are going to be built up to something worthwhile. Now, I've spoken to sort of people who come from Africa and that sort of thing, and they do agree that it would be ideal if they, with their skills, were to stay in their country. But they say, look, it's hopelessly corrupt. It's controlled by warlords. It's never going to amount to anything. The whole tribal structures and the cronyism and the patronage and all this sort of stuff, that those countries will never develop into something worthwhile. They're always going to be corrupt basket cases. Shoulder shrug, nothing can be done about it. So we might as well just accept that fact and come to the West, where we've got a much better chance doing okay for ourselves. And I do see the point, by the way, but then isn't that a case to go in, to these countries and try and help them rectify those problems of corruption and tribalism and cronyism and so on? And ultimately the globalists are shooting themselves in the foot here, because any attempt to do that will be seen as neo-colonialism and Nazis, Hitler, and so it probably wouldn't get off the ground in terms of the the wider propaganda attacks and the public opinion that would whip up. But that's really the only way. So people, the very small number of people who have talent in those places do want to immigrate, but it's only a very small number. Yet the immigrants that are coming into the West at the moment, most of them are, again, the illiterate peasants, angry illiterate peasants who've come from refugee camps, or they're just transported by the people smugglers to the West and so on. And they're fucking useless for an economy. They're not worth jack shit to any economy. And yet they're being let in by the millions. But the Jewish diaspora in particular, and the activists, they want to keep this idea of just completely open borders, but it's very self-serving. It's only for them, so they can move around any time. But there's massive collateral damage to all the white countries that provides just juicy opportunities for them to prosper, and that they want to move to at any time without hindrance. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.
I'm just looking a little bit there.